Have you been enjoying this season of Professionally Psyched? Well, in this episode, we are turning the microphone inward to meet the team behind the podcast itself, exploring how Professionally Psyched began from a simple hallway conversation to a growing platform that connects psychology students, staff, and alumni across JCU. Professionally Psyched is the podcast that brings you cutting-edge psychology research and real-world insights from our psych community of clinicians, researchers, and educators alike. We're here to explore how psychology shapes our everyday lives and impacts the world around us. Hi everyone, and welcome to Professionally Psyched. I'm Dr. Alison Sheaves, lecturer in the Psychology Department at James Cook University. And before we get started, we would like to acknowledge the custodians of the land in which we record. And for me today, that's the Bindal and Woolgoorooka peoples. And I pay my respects to elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and cultures from wherever you may be tuning in from across the country. Welcome to this special episode of Professionally Psyched. Today we join our host, Dr. Connar McShane, who is reflecting on what inspired the Professionally Psyched podcast with Dr. Dan Miller, Dr. Alison Sheaves, and Dr. Amanda Krause. They discuss how the podcast is helping students discover the breadth of psychology beyond the classroom, and what's next for the series, including student-led episodes, alumni spotlights, and expanding to new campuses and community collaborations. So whether you're studying psychology, teaching it, or just curious about where it can lead, this is the story behind Professionally Psyched. Enjoy.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Professionally Psyched podcast episode today, where it is featuring the podcast project team. I am Dr. Connar McShane. I'm a senior lecturer in the Department of Psychology here at Townsville, and I'm just going to pass on to my colleagues to introduce themselves. So Dan, over to you.
My name's Dan Miller. I am a lecturer in the Department of Psychology.
My name is Alison Sheaves. I am also a lecturer in the Department of Psychology.
And I am Amanda. I'm a senior lecturer in psychology, also based at the Townsville campus.
So I thought we could talk about how the podcast came about, which I think shows the importance of just like those hallway conversations and having common passions and interests in like side projects and different ideas that we have. So for a couple of years, I was like, because I teach communications at the first year level in psychology. And for a couple of years, I've been thinking about this idea of having these sort of like, bonus chats or small little snippets of recorded casual conversation between like lecturers and tutors around research applications to help students understand how to translate the things that you're doing and how, interesting all these little bits of research that we've been doing across the department and how diverse we are as a department as well. And it's just been floating around for a while in my head. And then I hit up Dan in the lunchroom because Dan runs the college research seminar series. And I had a chat with Dan, and Dan was like, you and Clint had been having conversations around podcast series as well. And then we're like, Amanda does all this stuff around music and radio and podcasts as her primary research area. And then Ali is like a superstar. At the time you were doing your PhD, but a superstar around feelings of belongingness and professional identity in the research setting. And so all those random little conversations came together for us on this project. Is that about right for everyone?
I think that sounds about right.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that coincided with that is Dan and I have been doing this research around students' interest in different subjects and seeing quite, for us who teach research methods and statistics subjects, a disconnect or sort of the interest and value that students see in those subjects is quite distinct from the more clinical subjects, social psychology, personality, counseling. And for us, we don't have that distinction, and we want sort of to explain how all of these subjects fit together regardless of one's career journey and sort of where you go with a psychology degree. So I think it was timely that we have actually quite a few research projects independently, collaboratively, and can not only do this from a research standpoint, but really through an applied project that also involves a lot of our staff members, our wider psychology community, and now also students.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sort of like lends into my first question, which is around like why is this series important to each of us? And I think what you said, Amanda, really touches on what I really enjoy about it, and what I think is really important about it is how collaborative it is, that it is open to and involves all staff members, engages directly with students at each level, and everybody who has been involved seems really enthusiastic about it. And so that's something that I've really enjoyed about working on this project. What about you, Ali?
Yeah, so I have been teaching first year since I think 2016 or 17, so really a pretty long time. And just year in, year out, there's the same thing where the clinical application of a psychology degree is clear cut and relatively well understood, but anything outside of that, I think, does not come across particularly clearly for students. And they just don't know what else, they genuinely just don't know what else they can do with their degree. And so many conversations in tutorials were just randomly talking about different projects that I knew about that was happening in the department, and they were so interested and they just had absolutely no idea. And so I like the fact that we can highlight some of that, and students can get a better idea about different areas, and then also just understanding the transition into fourth year. And it's ideal to try and find a supervisor that aligns with your area of interest, and students just have no idea how to find out what academic staff do, and so that gives them another avenue to look towards that. So, and as Connar said, the students really like it, and I like to see, like, when I start the podcast, because I'm there when it very first starts, just to make sure that everyone's getting to know each other, and just seeing like a first year talking to another academic, and it's a really nice I think it's a really nice moment between staff and student. I really like to see that. And then when they come back for a second episode, they're so happy, and they're like, oh, I loved doing it last time, I'd love to do another one. And that's a really nice feeling to see that.
Yeah. And I like that it sits outside of any subject. Like, we teach across such broad areas. Like, I teach in first year, and Ali, you teach in first year, but you've also taught at third and second and bridging program levels as well. And Amanda and Dan, you're second and third year, and teach into research and stats, as you were saying, Amanda. And I like, other members of the project. Jono, he's in the work integrated learning subjects, and Clint, who was involved in season 1, is involved across a broad range of subjects. And I think this was really a nice thing, where it's not tied to a specific subject learning outcomes. It's not tied to any of those things. It sits above that, and therefore it's something that we can make and tailor towards what students need, or what students would like to hear about, now and as each year goes on.
The other nice thing is, I think, as you were both alluding to, there is a lot of our students know us in the context of only one subject, or maybe 2 or 3 subjects, if they get far enough in the degree that, we've had them a few times. But often that may not be our research area. It might not be for our clinical, registered psychologists. They might not be talking to their practice as much. And so I think it gives depth to who we are beyond just the lecturer in front of the classroom or in a tiny box online.
Yeah, I agree with that, Amanda. It kind of breaks down some of those dynamics that are sometimes there in the classroom. And I know that that's sort of how I got into my PhD, was just knowing the people, lecturers in the department, on a more, like, I guess, a more personal kind of level, rather than just, you teach this subject and that is all I see, you teach me and goodbye. Like, it's a little bit more relaxed, I guess. Yeah.
I agree with that, and I think we're also breaking down the power imbalance too. We're putting students in the position of interviewers, which completely shifts us all to be on the same level in this project, regardless of if we're student or staff, how long we've been at JCU. None of that is important. It's just about sharing all of our experiences and what we find fascinating going on in psychology.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that students are interviewers because the students ask questions that the students would want to know, right? I feel like if it was an academic doing the interviews, they would ask questions that the academics want to know, right? Like the minutiae of all the research process maybe, but I don't think that's necessarily what the students are interested in. So in that way, at least it can reflect what the audience will find interesting and gravitate towards.
Yeah, I think adding that human element to research, right? So it's because it isn't just talking about research. We're talking about career pathways and journeys and like how convoluted it is for many of us and the different ways in which we got to where we are, which wasn't necessarily where we set out when we started our undergraduate degree. I think we all are in very different positions to what we thought we would want to do when we walked into our first psych class as a undergraduate student. And I think it also, like the clinical staff, were really interested in being involved in the podcast series as well. And what I really enjoyed about their episodes was the integration of research within clinical practice, sort of demonstrating that psychology is a discipline, all these research informs the application regardless of where you go. And it's critical to clinical work as well. So I thought a lot of those stories were really interesting and were great to listen to.
Yeah, I
I
don't
think for
know.
me,
Did we start off thinking it's going to be like career pathways? That kind of evolved over time, right? And I
Yeah.
think
for
it's a cool
me,
development.
it's a cool development. For me, that's one of the biggest outcomes is that I've created this sort of offshoot alumni spotlights, which was not the original intention, but really is exactly that, Dan, of highlighting career pathways. And what I really love there is that I don't think anyone's pathway has been a direct line from what they've thought it was going to be.
Mm.
And really, a lot of people talk about, I met somebody, I had a volunteer experience. So there's this nice blend of what you learn in the classroom, but also these extracurricular work integrated learning, volunteer opportunities, and even a lot of setbacks. I think it's really nice, not it's nice that people have had setbacks, but it's nice for others, for us to hear that we're not alone in that, and that really successful people maybe did fail a subject or took a path and had to restart a number of times. So that for me has been one of the best outcomes from starting this project.
Yeah, I have to agree with that because originally I think what we had all pitched was about this was like a science communication podcast, right? We were going to be talking about research projects specifically, like what project are you specifically working on right now? But when we were developing the interview protocol, which I think Ali wrote, it's you have to start with an icebreaker. You have to start with something to make everyone comfortable. And it was those opening questions that were then far more interesting in the content of the podcast than just talking about what we're working on right now. So
And like more interesting for the students, like as I said, that students just don't know that, that pathway to get to where they are. And because I match people up together, and then usually students will like email me what they're thinking about asking people. And the amount of research they do into each of your careers is insane. And they're like, they'll think about the political context or the geopolitical environment that we're currently in. And I think that this will be really interesting for students given this area of research. And I'm like, whatever you think, because like this is you are the ones that know what you're interested in. But the amount, like the depth of detail that they go into in terms of researching the careers of the academic staff is incredible. I've just taken it and run with it, I guess.
yeah. And I think that then goes back to Amanda's point. What is really nice is that it takes away that power imbalance. Like everyone comes to the stage equal. That's really cool. That was cool to hear, Ali. Okay, so what's next for Professionally Psyched? So where do we see the podcast going? And I think part of that is sort of like, a bit of reflection on what we've worked on this year that's helped set up where we're going to go next year. So two of those things are, feedback that we got from our season 1 pilot was that there was students would really appreciate some training around how to do an interview. And so we developed the interview skills workshop that we've run about half a dozen times this year or something, and that's been, I think, quite successful in giving students some extra context and skills to be able to conduct their interviews with confidence, because it can be a daunting thing to do. And the other thing we've established is the Professionally Psyched Advisory Board. And this consists of staff members as well as HDR, which are high degree research students, and undergraduate students as well, and to help guide the content, the directions, what we should be doing in the podcast series so that it can remain sustainable beyond us as a project. So I'll throw out to you guys, where do you think the series is heading? What do you think's in the future for Professionally Psyched?
I was going to say probably just building more on the advisory board and letting the students govern the direction of what they want to see and how it evolves from here. I think while we initially had this idea about what we thought students would want, now we're much more, I guess, taking a back seat kind of, I guess. I don't know how else to frame it, but to try and sort of go, well, like, and you tell us like what you need to know, because students change year to year to year to year, and what they need and their expectations, etc., change. So I think that's probably a big part of where we're all thinking.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's now handing even more control over to students in guiding what this looks like going forward. We've, I think, had a good start and, gaining some really good following numbers and listening numbers, and it's pretty exciting. But, we don't want to become stale. We don't want to take it in directions that are then not relevant to the students. The whole idea of this is to do something that is important to students, that they're interested in to know about psychology here at JCU. I think one of the things is we're looking to expand a little bit more to our other campuses. So we've got a large campus in Singapore, so moving beyond JCUA and looking at JCUS becoming more involved. Yeah.
On that, I'd like to see, maybe this is a hope for the future, but I would like to see more integration. We sort of started with the staff. We've now pulled in alumni. I think there's a real opportunity to pull in more community members. A lot of us research with community partners, organizations in Townsville. I think, we've done a great job starting with the department, but I think there's more reach that we could do. And I'd love to see, who we could pull in as interviewees in the future.
I love that. Because then it might help tell that story even better of how you work in community, what psychology looks like in practice outside of, clinical or intervention work. Like, what does this look like? Yeah, that's cool.
And as Ellie said, this is all of our podcasts. It's the student, the board helps create whatever we want it to be. So it can shift and change and expand. And that's what I think we've seen growth even in the short time that we've been working on it. So it's exciting to think about how it can continue to expand beyond what we're doing already.
What do you reckon, Dan?
I mean, it would be cool to get some people, like some academics from outside of JCU as well, especially ones that have research interests that's kind of relevant to us or the department. I know when we presented this at a conference recently, there were some of the conference attendees asked if they could be interviewed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I said, email Ali. She'll sort that out. Sorry, Ali. So that would be cool to expand beyond.
I was going to say, I think there might be the possibility of, I suppose, potentially targeting some of the just finishing fourth year students and as potential interviewees on like in the moment, because like a lot of the stuff we're reflecting back on in terms of I'm reflecting back on my experience, whatever, whereas they're like right on the cusp of they've just finished an undergrad or, you know, they're just about to move into whatever professional direction they're going to go into, whether that be clinical, whether that be research, but getting some in the moment, like I've just finished this is what my experience was like, this is how it was for me, and this is where I'm looking at going, and these are some of the things, you know, I'm applying for master's programs or whatever. And so some more in the moment, like captures or snapshots, so we can get sort of like real life, like lived experience, like right now, might be of interest to students, perhaps because we're just reflecting back on, and we sort of gloss over, we just talk about some of the highlights where they've just experienced this massive thing that most students don't really know what that fourth year looks like realistically, you know.
I think third year students would be real interested to hear that, right?
Yeah, like what does master's applications look like? How, you know, like even just stuff like that, you know.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, like reflecting on those experiences, because as you say, Alex, you know, as staff that have been interviewed, when you're talking about your experience, you know, you are just like, and then I did this thing, and then I got into a PhD, and then I did this, and not really like, if we take a moment, we remember just how uncertain those times were, right? And how stressful they were, but exciting as well. So, you know, be interesting to hear. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So, is there any other notes people want to say for the episode before I then go into the acknowledgements?
I think just, yeah, I mean, I know you're going to do acknowledgements, but just a big thank you to everybody who's been involved in any little to massive role in this project. Like, it's not possible without all of the people who have been involved, and it just really shows the connections we're able to build as a community. So rattle off the list, Connar.
Yeah, I think starting with that, like every single student, every single staff member who've been involved in the episodes, in the recording of the episodes, the interest that people have shown but haven't been able to participate in, those that have like signed up for the advisory board and the interview skills workshops, like none of this would have been possible without your involvement and your enthusiasm. So a huge thank you to the students and staff that have been involved.
Ali especially for the logistics.
Yeah. For the
logistics of organizing interviews. It's one of those thankless jobs, but
100%.
so vital.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ben.
So we can start with that at the top of the list. A huge thanks to Dr. Alison Sheaves, who, as a team member, has really taken a lot of the heavy lifting around the organising of the recordings of the episodes and matching people up and taking a lot of care with that. Really, thank you. You've done an amazing job, and we really appreciate all the work that you've put into it. I'd like to also thank then the other project team members, so Dr. Clint Knight, who was involved in season 1, and Dr. Jonathan Connar, who was involved in both seasons, so 2024, 2025. Huge thanks to Jessica Muller, who was the research assistant in season 1 and helped set up the protocols for editing, and then trained our editor for season 2, which was Craig Ryder Morris.
And we have to say Jess as the voice of the podcast. I think she'll live on. She's always going to be connected and has done such a fantastic job packaging everybody and thinking through those introductions are just absolutely amazing. So well done to Jess on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Jess's involvement has been critical, right? She's being not just like the voiceover and shaping that up. It was like that made it sound like a legitimate podcast. So she was fantastic, and all the work that she did in the research capacity, because we had a survey and we did interviews, and she developed the protocols for how to develop the podcast series and the terms of reference for the Psych Advisory Board, all the background policies and procedures and materials that were produced as a part of this. That is Jess and that is Ali, so who have done a lot of that work. So thank you very much. Then none of this would have been possible without funding. And so from our initial musings in 2024, we received a funding from the College of Healthcare Sciences Scholarship of Teaching and Learning seed grant, and that allowed us to record that first season. And then from there, we used that evidence to get a larger university internal grant, and that was the JSU Teaching and Learning Innovations Grant that has then allowed us to do 2 seasons worth of recordings this year, as well as put all the work into setting up the advisory boards and the interview skills workshops and all those sorts of things. So big thank you to those schemes. And it's been great. I've really enjoyed working on this project. This has been a fantastic team to work with, and I look forward to continuing to work on it with you guys over the coming seasons. But yeah, it's been a delight.
And if you're out there and you own a Fortune 500 company or whatever, and you want to sponsor a podcast, get in touch with us.
Philanthropic. Yeah.
We'll be Bunnings Warehouse presents Professionally Psyched.
You'll see us at the next sausage sizzle at Bunnings on a Sunday.
Yep.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to Professionally Psyched. This podcast would not be possible without the ongoing support of our psych community. If you would like to show your support, or if you want us to cover anything on the podcast, reach out via our emails. And don't forget, you can listen to full episodes on Spotify.